Welcome to another edition of Frontiers right here on Timveni television. This is a program that we discuss pertinent issues affecting our country. In today's program, we are looking at a particular topic, poverty. Rather, how can we end poverty? In today's program, we're talking to Phillip Gama, a development consultant. Welcome, Phillip.
Thank you very much.
For starters, just tell us, what does a development consultant do?
Well, maybe let me start with my background a little bit. I work with terrain consulting as a development consultant. I work a lot on issues to do with poverty, agriculture, livelihoods, food security, sometimes in education as well. So when we talk about a development consultant, basically we're looking at a person who specializes on looking at how we can develop communities. So mostly it's mostly about project management. So you're analyzing a project. You're looking at conducting some feasibility studies, conducting baseline evaluations for a project, evaluating the project to see if a project has really benefited the targeted beneficiaries or communities.
So with that view, you've studied a lot on how we can develop. Malawi has been talking about development for years, over 53 years gone by now. Where are we missing it?
I would say there is a lot that has to be done. If we are to deal with poverty, it doesn't need a one-side approach. It needs a multifaceted approach. Because when looking at poverty, we define it in terms of lack. Okay, lack. So lack in what terms? It can be lack in terms of food. It can be lack in terms of education and other things. But most of the times we look at poverty in terms of the welfare of a person. We define a certain set of values or standards that a person is supposed to attain as a welfare. So if a person is not able to attain the minimum standard, they are deemed as poor. Now, when we look at that, one of the things that we first of all look at is, and this is the most basic thing, is food. Which means even if we can do whatever, if we are not food secure, all the other efforts will not yield a lot. Okay, the results will be there, but they will not be that substantial. Where are we missing as Malawi? The problem is today, it's been more than 20 years or 30 years that we started receiving development aid. By now, you discover that if you go out in communities where there are projects that are being run by different NGOs, you find that people have reached a point where to them, when a project comes to develop them, what they are interested in is the handout, not necessarily what the project is intended to do in their lives. So because of that, you discover that there is more aid, there are so many initiatives that are coming in, but the people now have come to that place where they feel like, well, we are poor, we need to receive something, right? With the increase in population, you discover that an increase in population will also increase the burden on social services, right? So even though, let's say, the government may be putting efforts in making sure that the population is healthy or they are able to access healthy services, you discover that the healthy services that are being provided, there are some that are failing to attain the best services because the population is so high. The challenge that we've had so much that I look at is our poor planning. We, as a nation, have failed to plan for the population that is coming ahead. If you look at most of the plans that we have as a nation, they are 5-year plans. For some, to them, it's as far as they're in government and all that. Okay. there have been other people that have come with really nice ideas, great ideas that if implemented, they would start improving the nation. But because of politicizing everything, you discover that somebody comes and says, wow, this one was started by so. Therefore, I can continue with this because I'm going to build the legacy of such a person. So you come to a place where now you begin to see that even when something started popping up, all of a sudden it dies a natural death, right? I can give you a very good example of some of the projects. For example, the MGDS, okay? MGDS2. MGDS2 lays very wonderful foundations for the nation. But just, I think, 2 years after it started, and then all of a sudden it was phased out, and now we're talking of MGDS3. We had the Malawi Poverty Reduction Strategy and all that. They are really nice documents, but these documents, these policies are not speaking to each other, right? Because everybody comes with their own thing.
Let me cut you there. As you were explaining, you spoke about the culture of handouts. What people expect so much are the handouts. When democracy was coming in, people believed that now everything had to come from the government. Is this a wrong teaching?
One president of the United States, I've forgotten the name, said, as citizens, we are not supposed to wait for the government to do things for us. Rather, we're supposed to do things for the government. Because the question is, who is the government? Okay? When we talk of the government, we say, okay, the government is the people, in layman understanding. Which means if we had to receive from the government, we are supposed to receive from ourselves. Right? But we haven't inculcated that culture. The problem is when democracy was coming, it was long overdue, such that when it came, everybody felt like, wow, I am free now. You get it? It came without proper civic education. So people thought democracy means you should be lazy.
And wait for the government to do everything for you.
Which is the wrong understanding that we got. Unfortunately, this was not addressed, and this is bringing the problems that we have today.
Perhaps what steps can we take to be able to educate as much people as we can on the real concepts of democracy and for them to understand the concepts of development?
Well, I read somewhere about the history of Japan. After Japan was hit with the nuclear bomb, a lot of the infrastructure in Japan was destroyed. And the president that came had a challenge of developing the economy of Japan, which had now become a very poor country. Actually, Malawi was much better than Japan then. What this man did was to invest a lot in education. Why? Because somebody who has attained a certain level of education is able to contribute towards the development of the nation. If you look at, for example, let's talk about the poverty of Malawi.
Yes.
If you look at the poverty of Malawi, we're talking of 50.7% are poor in Malawi. If you look at that, you'll discover that close to 40%, actually more than 40%, is in rural areas. And the question is, why? Right? You discover that the urban poor are very few as compared to the rural poor. Even those that are considered poor in urban areas and those that are considered poor in rural areas, you discover that there is a very big gap. If you look at the poverty line, you discover that those that are urban poor, their poverty gap is around 1,000 something. Those that are living in rural areas, the poverty gap is 7,000 something.
Less than 7 now.
Right? You discover that this person whom we're considering poor in an urban setting, take him to the rural area, he is no longer a poor person. Okay, so I've been trying to look at what may be some of the causes. Okay, let's just look at basic primary schools or secondary schools. How many secondary schools do we have in rural areas? And how many secondary schools do we have in urban areas? How many primary schools? How many primary schools? you look at the staffing itself. How
the
many teachers? You're looking at the learning materials. Okay, so you're looking at this a young person, a child from Lilongwe, or let's say Lilongwe town or Lilongwe rural, okay, and Doha rural, because those are two different places.
Yes.
You discover that even though these two kids are both going to a primary school, a free primary school, their access to education will be different. Right? Even the motivation to go to school will be different. If you look at what we call the UNICEF child-friendly schools component concept, it talks about the motivation factors for a child to go to school. And it also looks at the environmental impact, the learning environment on the child. So somebody who is based in a very rural area will be less motivated to go to school than someone who is in an urban area. Eventually, this one in the rural area will end up dropping out of school at standard 7 or at standard 8, while somebody in a little bit urban area will still continue maybe up to Form 4, right? If we take the two of these and we are saying they should contribute to the development of the nation, how do they compare? They won't compare, right? So by the end of the day, you have people that have very low education, that are failing to contribute as much substantially to the development of the nation, which eventually will mean these people will now lay a burden on the few people that are educated and are contributing more to the development of the nation, right? So you discover that even though we can work around all the other things, but it will still come back to education.
Have we done enough investment in that area?
We are trying. We are trying. Unfortunately, the free education, it seems it came at a point when we're not very ready, such that it now diluted the standards of education. Such that now somebody is in university actually. You go to the University of Malawi today, you find somebody in third year or fourth year can't even develop a curriculum vitae.
Someone is in university.
In the university. Okay. Actually, I was helping somebody just a few days ago. The person needs to write her resume, and she can't. She'll be graduating very soon. Okay. So you're looking at that, right? So the standards of education have gone down. At the same time, we have indeed, yes, invested in education, especially through development aid, but we are very far from reaching the point.
You've spoken of development aid. Well, over the recent past, we've really depended so much on foreign aid coming into the country, straight through government and through NGOs. Are we managing this so well?
Wow. There are so many people that have argued on development aid. Some others have said development aid has helped to eradicate poverty. Others have said no, development aid hasn't helped us as Africa and as Malawi. But let's look at this. We always said when we have, let's say, a grant fund, 20% is supposed to go to administration costs, 80% is supposed to go to the beneficiary. But then let's look at this beneficiary. This beneficiary, we want them to do, let's say, good agricultural practices. But this person, we're saying that he's supposed to go to the field, cultivate the field and all that. And this person, as he's going there, he doesn't have food in his house. What will he do? You say, okay, let me go and do some piecework in somebody's field before I go and do it. By the end of the day, what happens? There will be, he will have delayed in planting, he would have delayed in weeding, because he's busy working on somebody's field. Right? We really need to find a way of empowering the people. Because we know that there is a certain level where we can say, go back to school. Right?
Yeah, of course.
Those ones, we need to empower them, find a way of empowering them, so that now they are able to produce enough for themselves. Because the first thing that we can do to eradicate poverty is to make sure that people have got enough food for themselves. Because even the Maslow hierarchy of needs, first of all, identifies food as a basic need. Before you can go to clothing, whatever, you first of all look at food. Okay. So if, for example, you give somebody, there have been different types of development aid. Some have gone to the point of giving cash transfers, right? Some years ago, about a year or two ago, we're evaluating a project where the international non-governmental organizations, especially those from the United Kingdom, conducted a cash transfer program. So what these guys were doing is they said, okay, apart from maybe just going there and giving them these people food, how about we give them money, right? Because if we give them money, they're going to go and buy any type of food they want. At the same time, this is going to spur economic development in the community, right? Fine. So this person is expected to use some of the money to buy assets like livestock to make sure that they are more resilient next time. But this person doesn't have food in the home. So they'll go and buy food first. Fine. What will the other money be used for? They'll say, wow, this is free money. What do we do? Let's go drinking. Okay. We faced cases like that where now they even reached a point where it's okay, let's give the money to the woman because women are expected to buy food first before they can buy anything. Well, when the woman received the money, immediately the man will come and say, well, I saw you are getting the money, I'm the head of the family, give me the money. All right. So eventually this woman will just surrender the money. So okay, fine. I'm going to give you some of this money. The other money, I'm the one who's supposed to use it. So people have gone drinking and all that. Yeah, they have been bylaws and all that, but believe me, the impact is a little. However, when development aid is coming, there is this very important component that has to be considered, which of course is now being put under the programming of most of the projects. It is the resilience component, where you are saying, okay, next time, should we give money to this same person? Okay, but then that's not enough. We need to empower these people with the skills and the knowledge, how they can use this money to become more productive.
Thank you, Philip. Today we're talking to Phillip Gama, who is a development consultant. We're looking at how we can end poverty in Malawi, just dissecting various aspects of development in our country. Stay tuned as we continue with our program, Frontiers. Welcome back to your program, Frontiers. Today we're talking to Phillip Gama, a development consultant working in the country. Welcome back, Phillip.
Thank you.
You've spoken of foreign aid just before we went for the break. But now let's look at the component of our political setting. You know, if you are living in a, let me just say every Malawian, not even just those in the rural areas, they believe that when they vote someone into power, that person's perhaps those people hold the solution to the various problems we are facing. Is this mentality okay?
We'll still come back to education. Because look at this. If we are to define the roles of a parliamentarian, a councillor, that is where we would now be able to see whether these people are really helping or not. Why is it that the people in rural areas believe that the parliamentarian is the one who brings solutions to their problems? It is because there is ignorance of what the roles of the parliamentarian or the councillor are, the power that they have. It is a wrong mentality. Unfortunately, our politicians are not helping us because they are banking on the ignorance of the people and using it as a leverage for them to get into the various positions of public service, which calls for us all and the stakeholders to conduct proper civic education. People need to know who are they? What is their role? What is the role of a parliamentarian? What is the role of a councillor? What is the role of a district assembly and other structures, the VDC, the ADC? What authority do they have? How can they hold the office bearers accountable and all those things? So there is really need for proper civic education, because we are sitting on a time bomb. Because without this information, without people getting to know this, it will be very hard for our communities to develop.
Earlier on, you mentioned of how it is different to be poor in an urban setting and to be poor in a rural setting. Does this give two definitions to poverty, maybe?
No, it doesn't. When we're looking at poverty, sometimes we look at it as a relative term. And it's a multidimensional thing. Relative in what sense? This person, if we are talking of the poverty line is something that we're using as a universal thing. For example, we're saying anybody who is living below, let's say, $1.25 a day is poor. Or let's say $2 a day is poor. Okay? So everybody who is below that is poor. But that poverty is also segregated depending on the level of poverty. So there are others that are ultra poor and the others that are just poor. We look at that depending on how close they are to the poverty line. For example, somebody is, let's say, if we take $2 as a poverty line, if somebody is spending $1.80 a day, this person will be different from somebody who is spending 20 cents a day. You get it? So despite the fact that these two people are poor, but they are different, right? Because this person who is spending $1.80, there is a possibility if something happens, this person may start even spending $2.10. You understand? Which means eventually this person will stop being considered poor, right? When I was talking about the urban poor and the rural poor, to say somebody who is considered an urban poor in Malawi, right, may be considered much better in a rural setting. It is because this person, for them, if we are to compare them to the poverty line, their gap to the poverty line is around 1,000 something. Kwacha. Somebody who is from the rural community, their poverty gap is around 6,000 something. Which means if we are to improve this person who is in a rural setting, we need to bring them up the ladder by around 6,000 something on their consumption. While this person, we just need about 1,000 something. If we look at the price of commodities in a rural setting and an urban setting, it will be different. So you discover that this person who is, let's say, spending 6,000, right, in an urban setting, if he takes the same 6,000 and goes to a rural setting, how much it will buy will be different. You understand? But despite all this, if we consider the poverty line and the poverty gap, we'll still consider these two people as poor. However, even though both of these people are poor, they are different because the other one is much better than the other.
I know you have so much to share, but because of time, perhaps what options do we have as solutions, as Malawi? What path can we take to end poverty?
There are several things. One of the main things that I always emphasize is education. We need to educate our masses. Not only education that they are able to read and write, but we also need to give them skills. I can give you an example of China. China is one of the most populous countries in the world.
And Malawi was better than it before.
Yeah. Do you know what they've done? What they've done is they have taken advantage of their population to make sure that they build skills in these people, and then they start manufacturing. Because they are manufacturing, then they'll start exporting. As they're exporting, just by making them become manufacturers, even of toys that they're exporting, they have created employment for them. Because you have created employment for them, then they're earning something. By the end of the day, they will begin to improve their lives. Education, on the other hand, if we, let's say, educate most of our population, let's say, if we were able to educate about maybe 40 or 50%, which is something that is very hard to attain now, but if we are able to educate them, let's say, to a master's level, to a PhD level, we would reach a point where we'll start exporting labor. Right? We'll have our elite who are going out to work because anyway we have people that are able to do something. At the same time, as they get educated, we shouldn't just focus on theoretical education. That is one of the problems that we've had. We have too much theory
and less practical.
Let's focus on the practical. Let's get hands-on. That will help us personally as well as economically. Number two, one of the other things that is also increasing the levels of poverty is climate change. Let's talk about the rains. You know the crops in the fields, how they're stressed and all that. By the end of the day, these people will have very little as their food, which eventually makes them more vulnerable to poverty. Right? So we need to find ways of dealing with the impacts of climate change to make the people more empowered and more resilient to climate change so that they're able to produce enough and have enough throughout the year.
Well, thank you, Philip. That's how we've chatted here with Phillip Gama, a development consultant. I believe we've picked a few points that can help us understand what it will take for us as a country to grow out of poverty, especially for the youth, what steps we should take to understand things better and also to make our lives better, as we know we are the ones who are to bring change to this nation. You have been with me, Ezelina Kamaliza.